a biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
It is enlightening to hear about biblical foundations for understanding male and female and recognising that there is divine design in the differences between the two. But it is everywhere now that confusion around sex and gender is rife, and we've become as a nation more detached from objective truth, so it's spreading like wildfire. Let's get an update today with women's advocate Kirralie Smith, who leads Binary. She says activists are trying to shut her down left, right and centre. Her opportunity to defend girls and women using the courts as a weapon. Kirralie's back with us. Kirralie, a special welcome back to 2020.
Thanks for having me again, Neil.
Kirralie, let's start with all the court appearances that you've been a part of. You must be waking up every day wondering, is this another court appearance day to day? You know, they're happening a lot, aren't they, in your life?
Look, absolutely, Neil. We're into like around the ninth court case now. So next week we have we're putting on an appeal because I'm under a 2-year apprehension of violence order for identifying a male in female sport. I've never met the man. I've never spoken with him. I was simply advocating for women's sex-based sports, and now I'm under this, you know, my words have been deemed violence. And anyone who knows me, and you know me, Neil, I don't swear, I don't threaten anyone. I simply speak the truth that males shouldn't be in female sport. So we're putting on an appeal next week in the courts in New South Wales, in Sydney, and then in July I'm expecting 2 decisions on vilification complaints. So again, 2 men have complained that I called them men in women's sport, and they claim that's vilification. It's not vilification, Neil. It's not hate speech. It's not violence. It's none of those things. It's simply advocating for women's sport. It's a conversation that we ought to be able to have in this country without fear of legal repercussions.
And I know that it's the T in the LGBT, the trans community, that is taking offence with all of this. And they're using the courts very effectively, because if there's 9 cases against you, it's as simple as making an application. All of a sudden you're back in court. Is that the way it works?
Pretty much. These people are taxpayer funded, whereas I have to raise all of my finances. And every time I go to court, it's thousands of dollars, usually tens of thousands of dollars, particularly if I need a barrister to represent me, which I do in most of these cases. So it's very expensive, very stressful. You know, it's almost unbelievable. How do you argue a truth when against something so bizarre and radical? That's a lie, that's a deception, that's a falsehood. No one can change their sex. Men are not women. It shouldn't be that difficult to be able to say that. And yet here we are in Australia in 2025, and this is where it leads you.
Well, when you've got laws that define nature and reality, I can only imagine there'll be those listening to us now who are so proud of you, Kirralie Smith, for being courageous and standing strong and putting up with all of that you are in the middle of. There's a challenge, isn't there, on how we navigate in a world where, as you say, men who want to be women have more power and influence than real women in Australia, because real women are the real losers here, aren't they?
Oh, 100%. You know, female athletes are threatened and gaslit. They're told if they speak up or oppose males in their sport that they will be suspended or expelled, that they will be reported for under the Anti-Discrimination Act, where, you know, parents have been silenced, coaches have been silenced, and people like myself literally are being dragged through the courts, Neil. And it's really frustrating. I guess my hope and my confidence comes from the fact that we're called to be salt and light, and the battle belongs to the Lord. So I am not concerned. I'm not afraid. I'm not worried. And it doesn't matter what they do to me in a sense, because I know I'm right. I am on the side of reality, of truth. And I know that it's only a matter of time until that pendulum swings back to where that point of reality is. But it is very frustrating, very time consuming. I could be doing a lot better things with my time than preparing for and paying for court. You know, it seems seems like every month of the year.
And it's another one of those dimensions, and we've talked about this on earlier occasions. When you speak up in your capacity, it is a political communication. And so one of the freedoms we rely on in a democracy is that you might have freedom of political communication. Otherwise, how can you stand up in the parliament and argue an opposite side to what some people will say is true? And so your outspokenness. Let me ask you about this, because this is really, really important, because we wouldn't ordinarily think of engaging in a debate as being someone who is guilty of being violent, but violence is attached to speaking up for girls and women these days, because you can't do that without being considered to be a violent person.
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, these people have hijacked our language for years now, that women are not allowed to be called mothers. We have to be called birthing parents or chest feeders or womb havers and all this nonsense. And so it's not really that surprising that they also want to label our words as violence. That's truth speak is now hate speech. It's very Orwellian. And if you haven't read 1984 by George Orwell, I encourage you to do so, because we're actually living it out. Right here, right now. And, it's quite mind-boggling that supposedly intelligent people go along with this nonsense.
When we're talking safety for our girls and women playing sport, their dignity and fairness, something's been robbed here. It's like all of a sudden it disappeared, and then you find yourself in court. It happened fairly abruptly, didn't it?
Yes, it did. As I said, I've identified a couple of players who are in female sport. People want the evidence. I gave them the evidence that these men were playing in these teams. Girls were too afraid to speak out or to object for fear of being called bigots or transphobes or dragged to court. And that's exactly what has happened to me in my advocacy. We are a registered third-party political campaigner, so we should be able to oppose these policies, give examples of where these policies are being, taken advantage of. No one is saying that these people can't play sport, Neil, and no one is saying that these men can't dress how they like or appear as they like, but it's when they insist and colonise and compromise women's sport and women's spaces, there's a real problem here. And it shouldn't be that these men, that their desires override our right and necessary need and requirement to have sex-based spaces, sports, services all along the way.
You mentioned those trans activists protected by taxpayer funds covering their cost when they make a complaint. All of a sudden there's a whole court case that has to be fought, and you find yourself on the receiving end of a whole lot of bills. Nobody's paying your bills, your legal costs here, as you say, when you have to employ a barrister. Well, everyone knows that becomes very expensive. That must have been quite a significant drain on you personally. No doubt there's a lot of good supporters, but how's that affecting you personally?
Look, as I said, it's constantly hanging over my head. It's something that I have to be considerate of. I would much rather be supporting parents and detransitioners and people who, are really suffering in this space, Neil, and yet I have to constantly be raising money to pay for barristers and solicitors so that I can defend not just myself in court, but I believe this is a much bigger battle than just me personally. This is about freedom of speech. It's about reality. It's about women's sex-based rights, and it's about child protection. And so that's why I won't back down and I won't give up, and I'll stay in this fight, because it's way too important to let it just go, by the wayside.
What do you understand about the sort of precedents that have been set at various levels in different courts that are entrenching some of these lies, these biological misrepresentations? What's happening in our courts? Because the more times the court hears cases like yours, and if they find against you, then does that become a precedent for next time? It's becoming even more entrenched in our society?
It really is. And there's a few examples I can give you. One is Sal Grover, who has an app, Giggle for Girls. She's in court, taken to court by Roxy Tickle, a man who identifies as a woman. The judge, a federal court judge in her case, said that sex is changeable. Now, you and I know, everyone knows that is actually not true. Sex is not changeable. Our sex is written on every single cell in our body that has a nucleus, and it cannot be changed. And yet federal court judges are stating it as if it's fact. So that has a massive impact on so many laws in Australia. And we also know that barristers and judges, lawyers have been told in court that they must use a person's preferred pronoun. So when a man says that he's a woman, everyone in the judiciary is now compelled to lie in court and refer to that person as she, her, miss, ma'am. So how can we trust a court system where everybody is lying or compromising truth for the sake of someone's feelings when courts were meant to be based on evidence?
Well, the battle continues. There's a very high emotional toll. There's a financial toll, tens of thousands of dollars for even sometimes a single court appearance. The toll on the rights of girls and women. Every girl and every woman would be concerned about these things. What about the toll that happens on the health and education sectors as well? Because they're all having to change and adapt.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm contacted constantly, Neil, by medical practitioners, school staff and parents themselves who all fear either losing their job or being taken to court when they want to affirm the actual biological reality of a child who's caught up in this gender ideology. They know what is best for the children. They know that there's underlying issues, and yet there's now laws against practitioners dealing with those underlying issues, and they simply have to affirm a child's make-believe gender. It's really concerning. These children are being put on in harm's way, put on irreversible pathways that cause them lifelong damage. They become lifelong medical consumers, and it doesn't resolve the gender confusion that is beneath all of these things. So we're in a really complex, really difficult and really harmful situation here in Australia. And at the moment, the laws just want to shut us down and not even have the conversation. So it requires people like myself to insist that we will have this conversation no matter what for the sake of these children.
And you know what? No doubt there's lots of listeners who really identify with you in what you're doing and recognise the courage that you have to be able to go through the processes that you do. Kirralie Smith leads Binary, and you can subscribe to their email newsletter. Binary.org.au. More than 100,000 email subscribers are already doing that. You should add your name to that list. Hey, you came out with a documentary late last year, and there's a free ebook that listeners can actually get a hold of, some resources on your website. Are they easily downloadable if listeners want to get some more detail?
Absolutely. If you go to the website binary.org.au, you can find pages to donate, pages to download resources, parental resources, look at detransition videos, and of course buy our book that has the stories of 9 families, Australian families impacted by gender ideology. It's a harrowing read, but really important and a great resource for you to share with politicians, school principals, your local doctors, anyone who is in this space and impacted.
And you mentioned that when you're on the website, there is a little button you can click on there and make a donation. I'd encourage listeners to find out some more about the good work of Binary and how you can support Kirralie Smith, who's going through all of these challenges. Kirralie, thank you so much for taking some time to share this update with us today on 2020.
I really appreciate you having me now.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.